Well, good evening, everyone. My name's Steve, and welcome to, I suppose, this year's. It's our. We've been covering the 12 steps, and tonight we will be focusing on steps 11 and 12. So it's been for any of you folks that have either listened live or listened to this after the event on YouTube, then you'll know that we've had a good journey this year. I was just talking to someone before I came online, and they're just making the point. I just said I've learned a lot myself from having to sit down and read through all the basic texts of all the fellowships, and which I have my preferences due to my own recovery, but it's always good to get online, read and research, and I always end up learning a lot. So this has been a great year for myself, and I hope tonight you get to enjoy it. Now I'm not at the hospital tonight, and I thought, why wear a suit and tie when I don't have to? So steps 11 and 12. This shirt is my example of a spiritual awakening, and so I suppose tonight we'll get into it. You'll notice, folks, that when you come online, if you could please just mute your microphones, and if you find that I do that for you, that's all that happens there. Is I'll just come on and mute you. It just stops the white noise on my end. If you'd like to ask a question, please type it into your chat box, and I'll pick it up that way. So let's begin. I think everyone by now knows who we are. We're South Pacific Private. We're on the coast of just outside of Sydney in Australia. It's a place that was started by Lorraine and Bill Wood because they had their own spiritual awakening by attending the Meadows and doing their program. Bill was in recovery, and Lorraine tells her story, and I look forward to Lorraine's book coming out in the new year when we go to open our new facility, and they had already experienced recovery, but were going to recovery at a greater depth. And I think that's what I've liked about doing the steps this year, is that we're not just looking at the steps from an AA perspective or for an NA's perspective or Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous, but also from that primary symptom perspective in breaking free, that where the impact that childhood trauma had on our self-esteem and our boundaries, our sense of identity, the way we looked after our needs and wants, etc. So just those symptoms of codependency as a result of trauma. So as we go through tonight, I'll be keeping that theme up, where I look not just at the 12 steps as a tool for recovery from a particular addiction, but it can actually be tools for recovery for anybody that's identified that they've come from that lesser nurturing parenting right up to that traumatic parenting, where they have got those symptoms of complex post-traumatic stress. So on to the steps. The 12 steps have been around now since 1935. They came from the Oxford group as the early pioneers of AA started to reach out for tools that they drew from that fellowship. But then the steps and the way they're written are written posthumously, so that you look that it states that we admitted or we came to or we made a decision. And this is because when the pioneers of the fellowship started to look at, well, what did we do for us to get here? They started to outline, well, what were the steps that we took? And the rest is history. And so these steps can be like tools in a toolbox, where you just, in desperation, sort of put your hand in and pull one out. And they can also be studied a bit like an apprentice would go to apprentice school and learn how to use those tools excuse me, in more of a linear fashion. So we tonight will build on the first step right through to 11 and 12, because 11 and 12 very much are the steps where built on the back and of the foundation of step 10, where people start to live in the solution and start to achieve and experience some of the promises of being in recovery. A lot of the earlier steps are really about just coming to and coming to believe, and then the business end of the work, where we do thorough inventories. And so I want to go through some of those, the 12 steps, and then the principles, so then we can sort of frame up how did we arrive at step 11 and 12 and where to from here. So in the first step, we came we literally came to, as they say in AA, we admitted that we were powerless, finally, over something that we'd tried to be powerful over. And in AA, they aptly put it, we're also powerless over people, places, and things. So it wasn't generally just the bottle that people were powerless over. It was self-will run riot. And that self-will run riot ended up in a life of unmanageability. And for some of us, that life of unmanageability was jails and institutions. And for some of us that have been around the program for a while will know, and even in your active addiction, you can have seen this addiction takes lives. Its destination is death. But if you got to a 12-step fellowship and had that first awakening that I've got to throw in the towel and win here. I can't fight this any longer. It's through surrender that I actually get victory over this. So that first step is a really powerful step. It's the first step. Without it, nothing else can happen. And it however, though, leaves us really just with the knowledge that we've got an enormous problem and our best ideas got us there. So the second step comes along and encourages us to come to believe. We came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. The key words in this step is that it just needs to be a power greater than myself. As the first step outlines that self will run riot, the second step says, look, we really need to find something. For a lot of folks, it's the power of the group. It's the compassion of the people, or the warm-heartedness as they greet you and say hello and welcome. And it's the identification with their first step stories and some of the stories they tell about what it's like now they're in the program. So we can start to believe in that power in the beginning. And as they say around the second step, we can believe in that power without understanding it. I can absolutely assure you I have no idea how electricity works. It befuddles me. If it was up to me, we'd still be by candlelight, I'm sure. And even then, I wouldn't really know how to get the wax into that little, the wick into the wax. But I do know how to change a fuse. I do know where the light switches are. I do know how to change a globe. I do know how to access that power. And I think the second step's a bit like that. Is I really don't understand the makings of the universe, but in desperation, I reached out for a power greater than me. And I've watched and heard many people over the years do that. And what seems to happen is this restoration. People are restored. They call it a daily program because that restoration needs to have an investment. That restoration isn't a one-stop shop where we just have this awakening that there's a power greater than ourselves and that's all we need. It's a daily program of reprieve. And so what we're being restored to is sanity. Now, for the Narcotics Anonymous book outlines that sanity is an interesting issue because it's one thing when we're poised with that second step that people will get really defensive. I don't know what you're talking about. I just had a bit of a problem, and they'll argue the insanity. And yet there'll be other people that are pretty quick to put their hand up for the insanity plea because they can look back now, especially at the unmanageability in the first step, especially at their attempts at being powerful, and realize that they just made some crazy decisions. And sometimes you realize that by hearing in 12-step meetings what other people did, and you recognize, wow, I've thought that way, and it can be a bit of a rude awakening in the beginning. The second step, though, is a bridging step because it just says, look, we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity, but if we don't go on and use that third step, we will not be restored to sanity. It's a little bit like I can be standing on the dock or standing on the boat, but if I'm standing on the dock, the boat's going to leave, and the boat's the third step. I've got to make a decision to get on it. And so that decision is to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as you understand him, or God as you understand God, depending on what program you've arrived at. AA uses the masculine version of God. Most of the other 12-step fellowships just use a non-gender version of God. So in this third step, it's a decision that we have to make. It can't be made for us. It can be suggested by others, but we've got to make that step to get on the boat. And the two things we're handing over is our lives, the things in it, our jobs, our family, our dreams, our friends, our things that we have to do, and our will, what we want to happen. And that seems to be the hardest thing. I know I've seen so many people battle with, I'm happy to hand my lives over because my life is unmanageable, or I've got a certain outcome I want. But I've still got some plans, if that's okay with you, God, that how I want it to go. So handing our life over and not our will, it's the will we seem to hang on to. But once we make that third step decision, we came to, we came to, and the second step, we came to believe, we put that sort of rubber on the road with a higher power. Then really what we've got is a really messed up mind, a lot of self-will wanting to run riot, and a lot of damage and wreckage that we need to attend to. And so the next bunch of steps that we have are ones that get us to do the housekeeping that we need to do to move forward, so we can get about the business of recovery. Addicts and alcoholics of any persuasion, including codependents with damaged boundaries, because as Pia Melody says, that untreated primary symptoms result in secondary symptoms. So the secondary symptom of the damaged boundaries, feeling really vulnerable and acting invulnerable, is that we actually have a lot of resentment and rage, and that resentment is old feelings. Apparently in the French language, resentment means to re-feel. And so a lot of addicts of any description and codependents come into recovery and they're re-feeling all the time. They've just got to have something drift into their mind. It's unhealed and it knocks them sideways. And so that resentment accumulating generally turns to rage. For some of us, rage outwards, and for others, we rage inwards. And a mixture of both can happen, where I try and keep it down, rage out, and then rage back in at me. So the next steps, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, are where we do a thorough inventory, fearless, where we really go in and we look at that powerlessness and look at that unmanageability and look at what was done to us. Look at what we'd done to others, how we'd impacted others with our addiction. Even in Breaking Free, the workbook that goes with Facing Codependence, Pia outlines that it's important that we, in our childhood trauma work and debriefing, we look at what was done to us. But now, as a result of the symptoms of codependency, we use the 12 steps to look at how our adaptions, how our wounded child has impacted the lives of others. So the fourth step, we start to get fearless and searching, and we do a moral inventory of ourselves. The fifth step, we share it with the higher power that we're starting to come to believe in, and another human being. We put it on the table. As Patrick Kahn says, promises to self and recovery don't seem to work. We need to involve others in our humility. From that fourth and fifth step, we got that chance of a list of defects of character, things that we'd done to harm others. In our codependency, it'll be our people-pleasing, our passive aggression, our over-controlling. In our addictions, it's going to be our rage, and it's going to be the negative behavior, the dishonesty, the lying. And so we really start to get to the bottom of those, and we share those. Then in steps 6 and 7, we really look and bring all those to the surface, and we share about our investment in them. We share about the positives as well as the negatives, because one of the struggles with those two steps is we don't want to let go of them. We want to keep a little bit of lust or keep a little bit of anger, afraid to let go of it. What will we be if we let go of that? Afraid to let go of our ego or pride. So working on that can be a real a journey in and of itself, defects and returning to them over the years in recovery. But it gives you a thorough understanding, and all of a sudden, like the Johari's window that we talk about at South Pacific, that what a lot of our defects are sort of blind spots, and we become aware. And I've always loved that Ken Keyes Jr. saying that to see our drama clearly is to be liberated from it. So with the steps 6 and 7, they can be pretty difficult steps, because we're looking at all the bits of ourselves that have caused us pain, even if they've caused us a short-term gain in the beginning. From there, from that list, we get the list of people we had harmed and become willing to make amends to them all. And so from that list, if you've got a good sponsor in 4 and 5, then he helps get the defects out of 4 in his listening or her listening to 5. And then out of doing the defects of character, we get that list of people too that we need to be willing to make amends. Some people we can make amends to, some people we can't, because we can't injure others in the working of this step. So those 6 steps really get to the bottom of it. And when you go to steps meeting and hear people talk about their journey through those steps, generally at the end of it, there's a lightness about them, that they're not running from the past. They've turned, they've faced it, they've worked through it, and to the best of their ability, been able to make a lot of headway in it. So they're really and generally radically different than they've been ever before. And so when we get to step 10, it just informs us that okay, now we need to continue to take personal inventory. Now those two words are huge, because that is 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 wrapped up in two words, saying we need to now continue to take a personal inventory. And it's suggested that we do this on a daily basis. This personal inventory will reveal defects we need to offer up and ask to be removed, and it'll start to see where we're at with our addictions and our bottom line behaviours, where we've injured others, and it teaches us a very powerful principle there, which is to when we identify where we've wronged, to promptly admit it. There's a spiritualist, I suppose you'd call him a metaphysical Christian, an existentialist, Neville Goddard, and he talks about the definition of sin being to miss the mark. So when I look at step 10 and see when we were wrong, one of the ways I understand it is well, where have I missed the mark today? Where did I miss the mark? It might have been deliberate. I might have raged at you because I was unhappy with you, or it might have been where I'd done something and looked back at it and thought, that I didn't see it at the time, but I was uncomfortable with that. Well, this is just reminding us, don't let resentment get hold. Don't let it sit so we have to re-feel it over and over again. When we do that, we have a tendency to isolate. Addicts or alcoholics on their own are in bad company. So the idea of that promptly admitting it is to say, look, I can't live with these active defects. If I'm not going to medicate myself with those old behaviours, if I'm not going to run on self-will, run right, then I need to keep taking inventory and keep cleaning house so I can move on. And as Pia Melody says, live in that spontaneity and openness that allows us to be an our functional adult. You'll have to excuse me tonight too, folks. I've been off today with just this summer cold that seems to be hitting our season over here. There's a few of us getting it, so bear with me, please. So that brings us to step 11. And I'll get into this in more detail now, that we sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him or understood God, praying only for the knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. And then number 12 is having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps. We tried to carry this message to others and practice these principles in all our affairs. So tonight we're going to look at these two steps. They're like the flags at the top of the mountain. And if that sounds dramatic, just remember what it's been like for you to work those steps, to sit, to really do your first step and share it with others, to look into that insanity and realize just how crazy we were and the fears that we might never get sane. The fourth step, the fear of sharing it with another human being. What if they judge me? What if they just walked out? The terror that can go with that. The defects of character, and when they're beating at your door and they feel so powerful and that they'll never ever leave us. The first real test for God, I believe, is that test, is asking for defects to be removed for us, not for a higher power. So by the time we get to this step 11, it's saying let's use this power greater than us now on a daily basis. How? Well, through prayer and through meditation. It's a relationship. What do we do with that relationship? Well, we sit humbly in the presence of, through prayer and meditation, asking and tuning in only for the knowledge of his will or its will for us and the power to carry that out. That in and of itself on a daily basis is a very important ritual and a very difficult thing and an easy thing to pass over, as most people get their lives back in 12-step fellowships. and in getting your life back, as the Buddhist joke goes, if you're too busy to meditate for half an hour a day, then you need to meditate for an hour. And so this is where we need to make that time to tune in, and we'll go over that now. And then the next one is having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps. So it's stating a fact. It's saying that if you've worked through 1 through 12, if you've arrived at step 12, then we have opened up. As Pia Melody would say, our functional adults come on board. worked through our history. We've turned up and we've owned up and we've started to practice skills living to our potential. So we're awake, we're alive. For some folks, they've had quite a serendipitous and synchronicitous experiences where it's inexplicable. They can't explain the nature of some of the things that have gone on. Bill Wilson's own stories, he cried out, if there's a God, show yourself now, and the room filled with light, and he felt enormous peace. And I've spoken to people even recently that had those moments in their recovery that are inexplicable, the grace that can come from working these steps. So having had a spiritual awakening, there's a responsibility on our doorstep, and that's to carry this message to others. And so the others is interesting because it doesn't say carry this message to alcoholics or carry this message to overeaters. It says carry it to others. So in other words, now we've had so much given to us, it's time to carry these principles out into the lives of others and to practice them ourselves in all our affairs. So tonight, that's what we'll be focusing on, 11 and 12. And so we'll continue to work through it. The principles of the steps. So what I just described in essence is the first step, we surrender and we accept that we have tried to the best of our ability to be powerful over this thing, and our lives just continue to get more unmanageable. Step 2 introduces us to hope. That just maybe what we see in the lives of others around us, that there could be a power greater than ourselves could help restore us to sanity, that we could start making better choices than we have up to this point. That third step, commitment, that we need to make a decision, can't be made for us, so we commit to that. The honesty of the inventory to self, the speaking our truth, the beginning of being in that integrity, of being honest with another human being. And for some of us, finally, it can be depending if you come from a traumatic history, it could be the first time you've ever been that honest. The willingness in step 6 to really just identify those defects of character and to not hide them, because it's still a big step. You might have talked about some stuff in step 4 and shared it in step 5, but step 6, bringing them out. So it's the willingness to do that. That humility to, in front of your higher power, as you experience a higher power, humbly ask to have those removed. The self-reflection in step 8 of, well, who have I harmed from this? What are the damage I've caused? For a lot of us, we've been in the blame game, so we'll blame others for our behavior, not wanting to own it and look at it. So finally, we can start to look at that. Making amends, the freeing ourselves up without expectation, making restitution, paying back debts, being able to look people back in the eye, being able to look ourselves back in the eye by that. The vigilance from step 10, exercising self-discovery, being honest, really, abandoning ourselves to the process, and the 12-step life, or the spiritual life, these principles, living by these principles. The humility, and the fact that we're in a daily program now, that we get an appeal, an opportunity for 24 hours to live a different way. We can't cash tomorrow's check today. We just need to focus just for today on today. Step 11 allows us to tune in to that power, to really start to stop taking the bus and get in the Ferrari in the garage, that is that higher power, that start to live a life. And we just had the pleasure of seeing Carolyn Miss over the weekend, and she talked very clearly how important it is to continue to make that journey once you get on these steps through to step 11 and 12. She talked about it in those upper chakras, but the importance of praying not just for, in the third step and early on in the program, we have a tendency to have what I call shopping list prayers. God help me with work, or God help me get a partner, or God help me get some money. By the time we get to step 11, it gives us very clear direction about what to pray for. Knowledge of God's will for us and the power to carry it out. To thine own self be true, but thy will be done. And that's the jump where we then enter, as Carolyn Miss says, the aspect of the soul, But Pia Mellody speaks very clearly about that when she says that when we restore ourselves to that functional adult and start to reparent that inner family and then really grow, that reconnection to self, she also says, connects us back to the soul. And so with this this power, step 12 takes us into service of being altruistic, useful to others, because we're in a spiritual awakening. We've got something to share. And it's not just with recovering people, but just with human beings in general. That we'll get to the 11th step prayer shortly. So step 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him, praying only for the knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. So let's have a look at some of the things there. I suppose step 11, when I first started working the steps, it was words are very important, and a good sponsor will tell you to get a dictionary. It really wasn't a lot of addicts and alcoholics in their active addiction don't spend much time in study or in thought. We spend our time in obsession. We really spend our time in obsession, which is a form of meditation, but it's to our demise. So step 11 is saying that we sought. And how did we seek? Well, through prayer and meditation. And so for some of us, we really need some instruction about that. In the 12 by 12 of Alcoholics Anonymous, they suggest up the prayer of St. Francis, which I'll go over shortly, because for some of us, the idea of meditating or the idea of praying is a very foreign aspect. We've never done it before. For others, it can bring back lots of painful memories of being part of a particular institution where you found yourself abused in that institution. So now a power greater than you can be something that just brings up, even for some of us, a post-traumatic stress reaction. Especially some of the icons of a particular religion can bring up that stress reaction in our bodies. So through the beginning, first time you ever work step 11, prayer might be something that you started in step 3, you started and used in step 7, but through step 11 now, it's saying, well, let's take that prayer and also add to it, meditation, that we're going to pray only for the knowledge of God's will, thy will be done. And then to sit, and there's all sorts of wonderful meditations out there. In South Pacific, we use mindfulness, or we have take 10 at lunchtime and suggest people get that app when they leave. Just that quiet sitting, anything from quiet sitting and diaphragmic breathing onwards, whatever gets you 5 minutes, inches closer to God, do it and try it. And I think that's the wonderful thing about recovery, is you get that chance to try some things and see what fits and works for you. Some people do walking meditations. I'm being someone who's always been hyper-vigilant and full of anxiety, I've found walking meditation, especially in the evening in the quiet or the very early morning, just regular, constant, regulated breathing is a way to get congruent and to tune in to yourself, tune into that deeper sort of inner knowing and what they call your intuition. So it's a seeking, and it's through prayer and meditation, and its goal is to improve conscious contact. So it's the idea is that if I can spend time, if I make that investment. Now, if you're a recovering human doing, especially perfectionists out there with really strong adult adapted children tendencies, we haven't got time to do this. We've got stuff we got to do. We've got to get it done now. We'll do this later. And I suppose AA, and especially the story of Dr. Bob, it was Dr. Bob's wife that suggested strongly, encouraged her husband to take a quiet moment in the morning to set up the day, something to which he accounts for in his biography. Why? So we can bring what might be unconscious more conscious. And I think a lot of mystics, Florence Scovel Shinn, Carolyn Myss talks about this, that if we can tune in to that part of us, that we start to have a sense of a conscious awareness of what we need to do. We might still have a little bit of fear of anxiety, but people that practice this regularly over time, a lot of that fear leaves. They get that intuition, they've practiced it in the past, they know that if they just step in that direction and trust that it all will be well, and has been in the past. So you'll hear a lot of folks that have worked this step over time say that that fear leaves them. So if you've been someone dominated by fear, I used to, when I first would hear that, I never trusted that. I always thought, they're just sort of saying something wonderful, so we'll all like it. But I actually know it and believe it to be true now, that there's an absence of fear once that faith is something that you've tried and tested and got an outcome from. Even if you, excuse me, folks, even if you don't understand it, even if you don't know what that power is, but you just got the intuition. And that seems to be all that needs to happen, is that we continue with that intuition. The other key phrase there is praying only. Only. That word really catches me. It's like the could word in the second step. Well, you're insane and you might be restored to sanity if you go on and hand your will in your life over. Well, step 11's sort of got one of those words in it. We want you to, through prayer and meditation, improve your conscious contact with a higher power, praying though only for knowledge of their will for you and the power to carry that out. Now, where this step does make sense, so if you're listening to this and you're new to recovery, it can be, whoa, Nelly, I don't know if I'm going to do any of that. I want to hang on to some of the reins here. It's like, God, you just put the fuel in the tank. I'm hanging onto the wheel. By the time we get to step 11, we've had a few of those moments where really we didn't think that that power was going to be able to get us across the line. With defects of character that were too big and too scary, ones that we just thought we'd never be able to get rid of. For you folks in recovery that started with a sobriety around one addiction but then had another one really tear you down, it's a little bit easier at that point to say, you know what, my best decisions, even in recovery, still, they sound good to me. And as Pia Melody says about recovery from codependency and childhood trauma, that in early recovery up to about the first 2 years, you actually feel more comfortable in the disease. You feel more comfortable acting better than, being invulnerable, acting good and perfect, being in control, being needless and wantless. That feels better than actually being in your functional adult, where you are going to feel more shame as you start to set boundaries and value yourself and challenge those shame messages and allow yourself to be perfectly imperfect when you've got a huge message that you've got to be perfect, or at the other end of that spectrum, that you're worthless. So even with those primary symptoms, it's hard to be praying only for the knowledge of God's will and to trust that, to just trust it, to sit in quietness, to breathe, to connect with self, and then to sit in that space of offering yourself up to thine own self be true, and therefore thy will be done. What we get here from this 11th step is, okay, well, guide me in my recovery and show me how to live. So these principles in step 11 help us to give it shape to what we need to do. So its main purpose is to connect us to a power greater than ourselves. And through that connection, well, then the connection then is to then take that power and then carry that message out to other people. So where we had in step 11 the idea that we need to build this relationship with a higher power. It's like any relationship. It needs to have an investment of our time. It's like active listening. I need to speak and then stop and then listen and then letting you sit with what then comes up. And for a lot of addicts and alcoholics, we get frightened to stop. I just got to keep going. So for this step is that on a daily basis, keep that relationship. Some days we're going to get strong intuitions and guidance. Other days we're just going to get a sense of relaxation and attunement. Step 12 comes in and gets us then to say, well, look, we have a responsibility now as a human being, as someone who's connected, to take this attunement and then take it out to others. So a couple of statements that around step 11 is that when we first come to the program, we usually express a lot of things which seem to be important in regards to wants and needs, and that's that shopping list prayer, that we can have those big long prayers to a higher power. As we grow spiritually, though, we find out about a power greater than ourselves, and we begin to realize that as long as our spiritual needs are truly met, our living problems are reduced to a point of comfort. And this is where Carolyn Miss was very, very cheeky the other day. She's always fun to listen to, but fun in a challenging way. And she made the point that if you're still praying for things, I'm going to slap you. And everyone laughed, of course, because I think it's that human condition sometimes to have those shopping list prayers, that sort of the child that I got a couple of young children, and they're always excited to tell me about that new thing that they want. And I love hearing it, to be honest, because that's really appropriate for their age, to really look for something and like it, and want to share that with someone and have other people value them by listening to it and asking them questions about it. But when you're still doing that at 45, it's sort of a problem when you sort of turn into your higher power and saying, with the latest catalog, saying, I really want this. Generally, if you've been in recovery long enough, you've had those things where you got to be careful. There's that saying, be careful what you pray for, you just might get it, where people had sort of done those shopping list prayers and focused their energy on something, got it, and actually realized it wasn't what they wanted. It was just something that was fleeting, or that they hadn't thought about the other implications of what that might bring if it actually arrived in their life. So with this step, the idea of what's important here is that the spiritual road is more important than momentary comfort. There's an old proverb that you'll hear sometimes in a 12-step meeting, and its origins seem to vary, but the way that I remember it is that there's a Chinese farmer that has a stallion, and he has a young son in his adulthood, but a young, very strapping young man. And his neighbor comes over and says, well, it's so amazing, you guys got this wonderful stallion. It's such a blessing to your family. And he says, good luck, bad luck, who knows if it's good luck that we got the stallion. And then, of course, overnight a big storm came and the stallion ran off and went up into the hills, and the neighbor rushed on over, of course, as in any fairy tale, that we're going to have someone like this, and says that it's such bad luck, you've lost that stallion, you must be awful for you, and to have lost something of such value. And again, he said, no, it's good luck, bad luck, who knows. The next day, of course, the stallion runs down out of the mountains and brings all these other horses with it and follow it, and straight back into the corral. The son runs out and locks the gate, and the neighbor, of course, runs back over and says, wow, what a wonderful stroke of good luck that this has happened to you and your family. And again, good luck, bad luck, who knows? We don't know. It's just great we've got these horses, but who knows if it's good or bad luck. And the next day, the farmer asks his son to go in and start to break some of the horses in so they can take them to market and sell. And in the process of breaking in the horses, he falls and breaks his leg. And him being the main source of support for his father, the neighbor, of course, wearing a track in the grass, runs back over and says, but this is awful bad luck that your son's broken his leg. And again, the father says, well, good luck, bad luck, who knows? And the next day, the army came through town enlisting all the young men to go off to a war that was unlikely that many would return from, and his son was unable to go due to the broken leg. The story stops there because it just accounts that by the time we get to step 11, our relationship with a power greater than ourselves is defined by the relationship itself, by the time we spend in prayer and in meditation. And constantly just sort of turning the soil on that, heading in good orderly direction, checking that out with our sponsors and friends, letting things go, taking things on. Grace seems to appear more and more in people's lives as they work this step as it's written. And the living problems that seem to come and go that happen in life are at a point where they're at least comfortable, that it doesn't derail people. Where in early recovery we can go out and have a flat tire or go to catch the bus is late, we get to work late, and you'd think that we'd lost a lung. So the idea that step 11 just allows us to mature, not just in ourselves, but in that relationship with a higher power is really important. Step 11 provides us with a tool for spiritual maintenance and a daily spiritual maintenance. And it really doesn't matter, I don't think, if you do it for 5 minutes or do it for an hour. Do it for the time that you've got. If all you've got is 5 minutes, absolutely. Close your eyes, diaphragmatically breathe, to offer up a short prayer, and then sit in silence. There's some amazing literature going around on the internet at the moment about the mindfulness schools. Dr. Dan Siegel's been posting a lot of that, and just how wonderful it is to see children, practicing those skills at such a young age. So different than from a lot of us. I'm in my early 50s, and I grew up in the area where school canteens were full of sugar and there was no such thing as mindfulness. Let me tell you about that. That step 11 is where with support groups and recovery literature can be used as springboards towards this spiritual and emotional growth. Like I said a little while ago, for a lot of us, prayer and meditation was absolutely not part of our life. It was something that was very new, and part of that humility we use in step 7 is we really have to humbly ask our sponsor, or a sponsor might suggest that we return to a belief system or a church or a mosque or something that we used to practice in our younger days. We might return to an old belief system. We might have to look up words and write about them. We might practice different levels of meditation just to grow and learn, but to be teachable. And literature in I still find today, I had to go to the hospital with my wife, and I knew we'd be waiting, so I grabbed the 12 by 12 of AA, knowing I'd be doing this tonight, and usually there's a long wait in those places, and I just got the chance to read through step 11 and 12 one more time, and I'll be 30 years clean next April, God willing, and I still learn something every time. I listen to a Pia Melody tape, or I listen to someone share about the steps, and today I'm reading and really just having a clearer understanding of it. So I think that the literature of the fellowship, especially in the beginning, helps you to strongly identify, and then part of the 12-step groups can be, you might go to a steps group on a Sunday morning, or a spiritual growth group, just to sort of get a better, see how other people do it. And then you might join a meditation or a yoga group outside of that to just give yourself those different experiences. Or you might go back to Bible study, etc. We'll probably reach a level, though, in which we hunger for an even deeper contact with the communication with God. And I think that's what you see happen. People start to see the results of recovery. And it's pretty overwhelming when it happens. and that we want more of it. A little story that I think I'll never forget, and I'll have to ask my mother if she remembers this. I just got out of detox. I was 22 years old. I'd run out of petrol in my old hometown. Very afraid of that flying dart syndrome, that somehow in the middle of the night I'm going to come across someone that's just going to syringe me full of drugs. It never happened when I was using, but the insanity of early recovery was it was going to happen against my will. So I started to pray, and back then I don't even know what I was praying to. I was just praying in desperation for support and to stay clean. And by the time I'd got home, I'd felt so different. My mother, of course, looked at me in a dressing gown. It was after a meeting, and she said, "Oh, what happened?" I said, "I'd run out of petrol." And my dad had one of those garages where you can get anything out of it. So I went and got a tin of petrol, and she said, "I'll drive you back to your car." And I said, No, Mum, don't worry. I've been praying to a higher power. It feels great. I'm gonna walk back and keep praying. I'll see you in a minute. And I didn't even think twice, just that self-centeredness of the early recovery. But that must have sounded more crazy to my mother than ever anything I said when I was using. But that was that hunger that you just start to get a taste that something is happening here and I want more of it. The 11-step prayer that they suggest in the AA book, because they say, look, here's someone that's gone before us that's not necessarily an alcoholic, but got to a moment of pain and stress, and they say and suggest, well, look, if you have not got an idea about prayer, here's something you can pray on, and then meditate just about what the words mean to you, and sit in quiet sitting around that. So, Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, and let me bring joy. Divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek, but to be consoled, but to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive. It is in pardoning that we are pardoned. And it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. Now, it's just a starting point. For some folks, that poem will sound too much like religion. They'll steer away from it. But the words in it just get us to look at living more deeply, living more from the heart, living more from love. So even as an agnostic or atheist, some of the principles in there can still speak to us. The point of the 11-step prayer, I think, in the Alcoholic Fellowship is that find something to begin with. Find something that works for you, and see how you go with it. The serenity prayer is another prayer that we use in the third step, but it's a step that can, in step 12, again, where there's another prayer. It's a real active version of the prayer. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, the wisdom to know the difference. At South Pacific, we tack on to the end, and the willingness to take action and do whatever it takes, that third step, the spirit of the third step. And the serenity prayer in action is that it is a mindfulness tool. It lets us know, look, there's a problem. Please, God, give me some peace, just a moment, so I can reflect on this. Can I change it? Well, no. Well, I need to ask for the serenity and work on acceptance. Can I change it? Well, maybe. I need to ask for wisdom and sit in that place, and then it's back to, can I change it? Yes or no. And it might be, can I change it? Well, yes. And I need to ask for that strength and courage to move forward and make those necessary changes. And so as a mindfulness tool, as a grounding tool, as a way of trying to practically bring in that intuition, that third step can be a prayer that we, the third step prayer, the serenity prayer, can be something we can add. This prayer of St. Francis can be something we can reflect on. But please, as Patrick Carnes suggested in the Gentle Path through the 12 steps, which are some of these suggestions here, get a dream journal, have a seeking place where we sort through prayer and meditations, and create a little space. If you're in a busy family life, try and find that little place you can do that. Even if it's your reading book in the morning in the bathroom, it doesn't really matter, and I certainly don't think it matters to God. It's more that it's a place that you can get a little bit of quiet and a little bit of peace. And at a time that's best for you. In the morning, it'd be about reflecting on the day. At the night, it'd involve a bit of step 10 as well as step 11. Any guiding metaphors or analogies or images of a higher power, you might want to have those in your little, in a prayer book or in your journal. A collection of sacred things or icons for you that might work. It might be a cross if you're a Christian, or a picture of Jesus, or the Bible, or if it could be a statue of Ganesha if you're Hindu. Whatever works for you, whatever you in your spiritual journey is the talisman that helps you reflect. Absolutely. I might be holding a crystal, lighting a candle, just coming and starting that relationship with what's sacred to you. Get into a meditative place. Where will you do it? Construct that. Don't wait for it to happen. Where are you going to do this? How are you going to create this for yourself? Having a spiritual mentor, either live or past, as a deity or a spiritual teacher. A lot of people use Jesus as their spiritual teacher and use the Bible as his teachings, and others will go to a spiritual counselor or see their pastor. Sponsors can be a great spiritual mentor to help you work through the steps. The main thing here is it's a relationship. And as P. Melody says, time, attention, direction. In regards to that relationship, I've got to put time in, and I've got to give it attention if I want to get that direction, if I want to be able to move to direction. A lot of folks in recovery, we just want that direction. We don't want to spend the time. We don't want to spend the attention. And this is a spiritual practice. And as Carolyn Miss sort of said on the weekend, we got to get over ourselves and get on with it. And so for this step, it's time to get on with it. Sometimes, the step 11 is that we just have to bow our head and say a prayer and weather the storm. And just for today, there's been plenty of times in recovery where a day clean has been a successful day, but I might be going to bed feeling really awful. And that if I'm clean, then it's at a point of comfort. I've got through it, and the program's still working for me. So I remember taking this picture down at the beach in the middle of a big storm, and then this saying was one that I'd read, and I thought, it just made for a beautiful image with that fella standing there. So, step 12, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and practice the principles in all our affairs. So this is the business end of the deal. This is where we go, wow. When I first came to this program and looked up at those 12 sentences, I had no idea how that was going to change my life, 12 sentences. But now, after working them, I'm alive, I'm different, I'm awake. And I really think that the awakening is really, we've come out of denial. As Carl Jung says famously, that if we don't make the unconscious conscious, it'll direct our life. We'll call it fate. So in this circumstance, we're pretty conscious now. We've got a conscious contact with a higher power. We've cleaned house. We've got an active spiritual life. So we're awake now as a result of these steps. So there's a responsibility there to carry the message to others, to our, in AA, to alcoholics, and to practice these principles in all our affairs. So the thing here, the wonderful gift is that we've had a spiritual awakening. We can carry this message, but what's particular, I suppose, and the early AAs, Bill Wilson and Dr. Bob, learned this, that when they preached, not only didn't they get anyone else sober, they relapsed themselves. Especially Bill, he relapsed himself when he started just to tell his story of what it was like when he was drinking, what it was like when he got to the program, and what it's like now working the program, what it's like in the spiritual awakening. Then other people identified with that. So carrying that message is one of the things that when you see the eyes of another person get that recognition that someone finally understands them, it's such a beautiful thing. And then to watch them start to get well, that's priceless. Carrying the message, though, we've got to carry a living message. So practicing the principles, those principles I read out from the 12 steps, is something that we need to practice in all of our affairs, not just at work, not just at home, but the challenge will be that we have to practice them in all our affairs. You'll see a lot of pictures of Curl Beach. I had a habit of every morning when I arrived at work, I'd take a picture of the sunrise, or at night sometimes the moonrise. So having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, in this moving on to step 12, here's some of the gifts that we get from it. The witnessing of others getting well is quite amazing. It's a privilege, actually. I've come to learn that sitting in 12-step meetings and listening to other people share, honestly, for free, telling stuff that really, at one time we never would have told anybody, was simply amazing. Just to be able to watch them go through their steps and make those surrenders, and then start to see the gifts of recovery turn up, and especially that spiritual awakening. We just had the big Sydney convention. There's a CODA convention on the weekend, a Sex and Love Addicts, or a Sex Addicts Anonymous convention on the weekends. Any of those big conventions where people celebrate their awakenings. It's such a beautiful thing to be able to listen to. The hearing the stories of newcomers remind us where we came from, so we don't get lost and think that it's not a danger for us to return to old behaviors. Modeling to others, we get to practice these principles in all our affairs, so we get to practice what we're talking about. Giving to others, that altruistic, the chance to just help and be helped. It can be pretty weird in the early recovery when people are helping you. You think, what are they getting out of it? There's got to be, so they're after converts or something. But I had people in early recovery give me furniture and help set me up and help me move house, and you get a chance in recovery to give that back to folks. I've given furniture away, I've given gifts away, because people gave to me, and it's always an easy thing to do, because I wouldn't be here if people didn't pick up that phone or help me in those real practical ways. Working hard to understand the whole story. So the one before it there, sorry, so supporting new beginnings and revitalizing your own recovery. So when you're really helping someone get hold of those first 3 steps, it really does bring back the basics. Giving an emotional support to people through difficult times is another way too, to really connect and grow. And when you're really in the throes of something with somebody, in the throes of that storm, praying with somebody can be a special gift. Listening to a 5th step can be some of the most powerful moments I had, of listening to others share their 5th step to me, and just how wildly humbling that is, and to have someone trust you with their life like that. And helping others focus on the basics and focusing on the solution and not the problem. What I really got out of Carol and Mrs. talk the other day, and I see it in the fellowship a lot, you can get stuck on that revolving door and keep relapsing and keep just struggling with the first step, and we're really stuck in the problem, and we never really get out of the mud hole. When you finally get through that spiritual awakening, then we actually are focusing on the solution. We're not stuck in the problem. I still identify myself as a recovering addict, but I don't see that. That is not a limitation for me. I really believe I'm not just an addict. My influence these days, in a sense of I can practice these principles in all my affairs. I can carry a spiritual message to anybody, and so I get a lot of warmth, and I know that some people don't like the 12-step fellowships for this because they label folks, and I do understand when you stay stuck in that label, it can be very limiting, but I still believe that's a choice. I went on the weekend and I heard people share with a lot of time up, and they're in the solution, and they've been living that solution for a long time. And I think that's the goal and the gift of that spiritual awakening as a result of these steps. So if you're new or struggling or listening to this online later on through our YouTube channel, please, don't give up on a daily basis, because you could be just 5 minutes away from that miracle actually happening. The idea of that altruistic message is sometimes in our recovery we can be a rainbow in someone else's cloud. And I remember taking this picture and seeing that double rainbow down at Curl Curl Beach, and just being mindful of this saying that there was a saying in NA and AA too, that just for today I'll have faith in someone who believes in me. And our program manager at the hospital, Chris Mordew, he has the phrase there that, let us hold the hope for you today on those days where we're truly hopeless. And so the carrying of the message sometimes is we can be entering into people's chaos and the pure unmanageability, the hell of active addiction, and carry a strong and powerful message that whether they get it that day or later on, that there's an opportunity for them that just for today they need never have to use again. So with step 12, life can take on a new meaning. We start to watch people recover. We see ourselves recover. We start to help others. And the loneliness that seems to be such a part of the spiritual dilemma, where when we're finally connected with God, one of the gifts in step 11 is we're in that deep relationship with self and others. That sense of belonging really opens up to where we don't just sort of see ourselves belonging in AA or a local meeting, but on the planet we feel more connected. So we see a fellowship grow up about you, to have a host of friends, that in the end, that's where people are going to meetings, is to see their pals. I got people now I've known for nearly 30 years, and I love to hear about them and to speak to them and stay connected with them. And yet early on, it was so frightening to ring them. I wouldn't miss that for quids. And the other thing is that frequent contact with newcomers. I know at the NA convention at the opening meeting, they did the countdown, and the people in the first 10 days, they invited up the front. They gave them all a copy of the basic text, and everyone really made them feel welcome. And it still, can sometimes make me feel emotional just watching that happen, that they're the lifeblood of the fellowship. New people coming in, we can get the chance to carry our story. Another phrase I like in recovery is that we're not human beings having a spiritual experience, we're spiritual beings having a human experience. And I know Lorraine Wood, our founder and owner, uses this expression a lot. And I think step 11 and 12 bring us into that awareness that there's something bigger going on inside of us and outside of us, that we're connected to the universe. The promises, I'm going to finish on the promises. And we do our training at the South Curly Surf Club, and this is their front window, and our whole attitude and outlook on life will change, and it's in the 12 promises of AA. And I just want to finish on those. That if we are painstaking about this phase of our development, we will be amazed before we are halfway through. We are going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. We will not regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it. We will comprehend the word serenity, and we will know peace. No matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. Step 12. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. That's that carrying that message. Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook on life will change. Fear of people and of economic insecurity will leave us. We will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. And we will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. We will intuitively know comes from that relationship, step 11. And then carrying these principles and practicing them, carrying the message and practicing these principles in all our affairs is a chance to grow and learn through the eyes of others. And so our final webinar for the year will be on the promises around Christmas time. So I really look forward to going into the 12 promises in great depth and in our last webinar. So stay tuned for that. And I suppose it really brought us to the end of our time. I don't know if there was any questions. You can certainly send any questions through, or send them, email them through to us at South Pacific. It's been a fantastic experience, as I said when I started this, to bring the 12 steps to you over the course of this year. I got a lot out of it in just having to read and live and learn, and I suppose it did remind me of a couple of things. As I said, when I first went to 12-step fellowships, I had the experience that I had no idea how 12 sentences were going to change your life, especially get well from drugs. When I got to step 4, I really felt that if anyone hears who I really am, they'll leave me. And in step 5, my sponsor stood up, shook my hand, said there's nothing in there I didn't do myself or thought about doing, and he gave me some stuff on step 6. When I started working on the defects of character, rage started to come up in my relationships, and I really remember thinking, God, I can understand how you could remove the desire to use, but how you're ever going to take this out of me, I'll never know. And a lot of that defect of character has been removed. And these days, helping others, I find my work at South Pacific and service at being secretary of a meeting, and I still enjoy the road to recovery. And so I hope that these webinars and the steps have inspired you, that they've helped you, maybe given you some food for thought, and encourage you to continue on with the program. It's not easy. I heard a guy on the first tape I ever heard say that when he first got into recovery, he felt like he was being dragged behind a bus, and that in the end he learned to smile while he was being dragged. I think there'll always be part of me that would love to just tune out and tune off. But yet, once that spiritual awakening occurs, I think we know that we're now trudging the path to a happy destiny. That no matter what happens, that spiritual relationship will sustain us and help us live a life, at least be comfortable in the life that we're in. So our details are there. This will be posted on our YouTube channel tomorrow. Our other webinars are there, so please, if you've heard anything tonight that you've liked, please tune in. Tell some friends if there was anything tonight you thought someone else might enjoy. Please steer them towards our YouTube channel. Contact us at South Pacific. And remember, you are a miracle. So good night.